Hello, and welcome back to Things No One Cares About. Today I'm going to be continuing with the review series on the Professor Layton games. So canonically this would be about where the crossover game with Ace Attorney comes in, but I haven't had the ability to actually really fully play that one myself, so I'll revisit that review later. It doesn't really feel like fair. So today we're going to be talking about Unwound Future or Lost Future. Again, not sure why they felt the need to localize it like that. But just a reminder, I'm going to be evaluating the games on the basis of premise, characters, puzzles, music, atmosphere, and ending, and then I'll be giving it a grade A through F, and then S tier for the best games. So let's get into it. So we'll start out with the premise. Like the previous games, this premise is kind of long and kind of hard to nail down. But again, I personally like that. I think that is a mark of pretty good pacing. The game starts out with a letter from the future Luke. And he writes that he's 10 years in the future where his London is in absolute chaos due to a calamity that hasn't yet happened in the present timeline. And he directs them to a clock shop where they can meet. And Layton believes that this letter is connected with an incident that happened a week prior in which a scientist named Dr. Stangun, I don't know what is wrong with me. I've played these games literally 1,000 times, and Chelmy and Stangun, I literally pronounce them different every single time. Anyways, he was demonstrating his new time machine, and he used the Prime Minister, Bill Hawks, as the guinea pig, and the thing exploded. All the scientists and the Prime Minister disappeared without a trace, which, not great. Anyways, so they head to this clock shop, and the whole floor shakes, blah blah blah. They're in the future, London 10 years in the future. And that's kind of the story. So once there, future Luke explains that in this London, an evil genius popped up, staged a coup, and is basically rolling over the city. And this guy's obsessed with time travel and teams up with Dr. Stangun to create a working time machine. And young Luke's like, oh my god, it must be Don Paolo because he was the villain from the other two games. But it's not. It's future Layton. And Layton is I don't really know about that, but he goes with it, he likes a good mystery anyways. So I think this is a really cool premise, but I have some issues with it. More in terms of the mystery. On the pros for this premise, the possibility of time travel is always cool and fun. And I also really like how Professor Layton is a supposed villain. I think the premise in theory is interesting and cool from a story perspective, but from a mystery perspective, it bothers me how the premise very quickly narrows the mystery element. With the diabolical box and the curious village, the mystery is super open-ended. We have to find the golden apple. We have to, explore the truth of this box. It's not really a binary mystery, but with this game, from the start, to me at least, your options are either believe that you've traveled into the future and that this is future Luke, future Layton, or you don't believe that and you automatically know that there's something up with this guy, future Luke, and that there's something up. And I feel most players reasonably assume that time travel is not possible, so then the mystery kind of just becomes what's the ulterior motive, which I guess is still pretty open-ended, but that's just a minor thing that kind of bothers me. And also, even in the game, Layton is never even remotely convinced that from the second you meet, the first thing that you do when you get into future London is you go to a hospital and you meet an aging Dr. Schrader, and that's supposed to that's a ploy to it ends up being Don Paolo in disguise, but that's to convince Layton and Luke that they've traveled into the future, and it literally disproves that. So the second that happens, Layton's okay, he's not fooled the whole time, which I just think is so funny. Not he's really ever fooled in the other games, but he still has to figure out stuff in the other games, and I mean, he still has to figure out stuff here, but I don't know, it's just a minor thing. And we do later learn that time travel does kind of happen with one small thing, and that definitely is another twist, but it just bothers me that the main shocking that they haven't gone into the future is really obvious from the premise. It's just a little thing. I do think from a story perspective, it's fun and interesting. It's fine premise, but it's just a little bit lacking in terms of figuring out the mystery as the player, because again, the twist from the start. There are other twists, I'm not saying that. I can already hear people like, there's one twist that matters, but that twist, which I'll talk about later, is like kind of a tangential twist. It's not the main part of the mystery. It's more like the motivation for the events, but we'll get into that later. So moving on to the characters in this game, we do get a fair bit of character development for Layton's character, and I'll touch on this again more in the ending, but mainly we see flashbacks of his first love, Claire, and she's the one who gave him his signature hat and like had a big part in like, you know, developing his whole like gentleman like value system. And she died 10 years ago in an explosion at a lab she worked at. We will talk about this more later, but it is super sad, but it's good character development for Layton. Luke's basically the same. There is like a cute little sad scene where he like worries if he's like ever gonna like see the professor again, and like what it's like kind of just questioning like what it's like to like grow old with friends. Yeah, just because like canonically it is interesting, like this is the last time we'll see Luke in canonically until the timeline, or until the anime, which is like very far in the future. But yeah, Luke's basically the same. Flora is treated like garbage yet again, and the same rant I gave last time applies this time. They leave her to go to the clock shop, and I can like mildly excuse this because I guess they didn't fully know that they would be going into the future, but they come back to like current London, and they fucking leave her again. She literally like makes them sandwiches, and then she like leaves them, and or they leave her. It's so annoying. It's so annoying, but she follows them into the future. Chelmy and Barton are also in this, and they're basically the same. Then we have Claire, who we meet in the flashbacks. She's very sweet and smart and seems like a great match for Professor. We meet her twin sister, Celeste, in future London. More on this later. Then we have Dr. Stangun, aka Dimitri Allen, spoiler. He's a crazy scientist. Kind of, I don't know. I guess maybe he's not like that crazy, but he's like a scientist guy, and he actually worked with Claire in that lab, along with her and the Prime Minister, Bill Hawks. The cause of the explosion and that whole story is basically the motive for the whole plot, so I'll talk more about him in the end game, but I think he's a very cool character. In Future Legend, he controls the family, which is kind of like the mafia. He's cool, but he does kind of end up being a pawn. I think he's one of the most... He's like one of like the least like flamboyant villains in the series, but he is kind of boring, and I think one thing that's always kind of bothered me, and I'll talk about this later, but like most of the villains in this series like literally look the same. Like you have Dimitri Allen as Dr. Stangun, and he honestly kind of looks like Descalais in a lot of outfits, and they also kind of look like the masked gentleman from Miracle Mask. I don't know, just a me thing. I think they could have, like, it's really weird. And then you have Don Paolo, who's like, dude, looks so different. Like, they could have varied it, but anyways, he's fine. Then we have future Luke, who is not actually Luke from the future. He's a good character, kind of. He's like a split. He's a very immature and like childish character, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but his motives are kind of like split in terms of believability, in my opinion, which I'll touch on in the ending. Bill Hawks will also be talked about more later, but he's not so much of like an explored character, just as like a classic like shithead politician who's also like was a like famous scientist. I don't know. I guess that's fine. Don Paolo is also in this game, and he does become pretty plot relevant and was actually helping Dimitri Allen using his disguise skills, because Don Paolo also, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but he also helps Layton out a bit. So like the main thing we learn about Don Paolo is that he went to college with Professor Layton and Claire, and he loved Claire as well, as did Dimitri Allen. The moral of this game is everyone loved Claire, but he blames Layton for Claire's death because he thinks that he should have protected her. I want to just circle back to this discussion where I was saying that like I thought he didn't really fit into these games, and especially in Curious Village he didn't have like a plot purpose, but that in Curious Village like we were meeting him, and so it all came down to like the resolution of his storyline, which is in this game. And so I wanted to revisit that. I still do think he feels like out of place, though I will say this is the only game where I feel like he is a real character, and he's like complex. He helps Layton at some points, but he still like struggles with like him hating Layton. But on that note, like, I still maintain that he's still too, like, slapstick for the other two games. Like, I find the motive of hating Layton because he loved Claire and blames him for her death is really compelling. But that's such a deep and profound and, like, dark motive that when you compare it to, like, the ways that he, like, tries to foil Layton and he's like, Layton, like, that's, like, it's almost, like, disrespectful to, like, the depth of the storytelling in this game. It just doesn't match that. Also, his love for Claire does not explain why he's, like, a thief, and that's, like, an ongoing thing. Like, he steals the Elysium box, he steals, like Big Ben or something in, like, Eternal Diva. Like, it doesn't really explain, like, that. I also would have personally just loved to see where he learned, like, all his disguising stuff. I don't think we do ever get to see that. I don't know, it just kind of feels like he was thrown into the first game because they felt like they needed a villain. These games oftentimes feel the need to have a villain or, like, an explicitly, like, villainous end, and I don't think they always need that. Like, Diabolical Box didn't have that, and it was beautiful, and I'll touch more on what I mean by this in the end game, but, like, I feel like they just added that in that game in Curious Village because they felt like they needed to have a villain, even though in that game they didn't need to have a villain. And then they were like, oh shit, what do we do with this guy? And I think they wrote him in, like, well. Again, he's the best he's ever been in this game, but I just don't think they did enough catch-up work to, like, explain or deepen all the character choices from the first two games and also the movie. Like, I just don't think he needed to be in this game. Sorry. So the last specific characters I'll talk about are Cog and Sprang. I don't really have too much to say about them. Other than they freak me out. I don't know, they're just really weird. I don't, like... They're honestly, like, the only characters from any of these games that, like, I wouldn't want to, like, meet. Like, I would be terrified. I don't know why them, but they just really freak me out. That's all I wanted to say. And then the ensemble characters are pretty okay. In terms of, like, groupings, we have, like, the scientists in Future London. We have the family, like, the mafia people. We have other Future Londoners mainly. And I think Future Londoners, I would compare them in terms of what they provide to, like, I would compare them to the Curious Village, St. Mystere villagers, and also to maybe the Dropstone villagers. But I think the Future Londoners are actually really kind of boring, and don't really have any, like, specific vibe when you compare them again to St. Mystere or the residents of Dropstone or even Fall Sense. They're just, like, there. And the scientists and the family, they have, like, reasons for being there, and it's interesting. I just kind of feel like in terms of ensemble characters, it's a lot weaker. This game relies a lot more, and this is again going to become a theme in, like, my review, this game relies a lot more on, like, the main canon storytelling, whereas I feel like a lot of other games did put a fair amount of focus on, like, things like atmosphere and, like, all the characters of the ensemble. All of this game is, like, this game is about Layton, like, more than the other games, which is fine. It's a choice, but that's just something to say when we're talking about characters. Okay, so now we'll move on to puzzles, and this is a notable game for puzzles. It's definitely one of the harder puzzle games in the series, I would say. I think this and Diabolical Box are harder than a lot of the other ones. There's a lot of number and math, like clock puzzles, which I really appreciate the parallelism to the theme of the game. I think that's a nice touch. But they can get a little tedious, although I am not the biggest fan of those puzzles, so if you really like them, that'd be great. And they can be pretty hard. We do see some, like, more good puzzles that come in series, like Slippery Trip, Leapfrogs, What Day Is It, Making the Cut, and Hatgrams. I do think Diabolical Box had more of a variety in the puzzles, especially in terms of the answer types. And also Diabolical Box had a lot more series, and a lot of the series in that game I just liked better. So for that reason I would say I liked Diabolical Box more than this, but I think I like this game's puzzles. Again, I keep comparing it to Diabolical Box, but, like, let me make it clear that this game and Diabolical Box, I'm almost positive, I mean, I'll see when I'm going back reviewing these games and thinking more in depth, but, like, these are my two favorite games, so that's why these comparisons are always going to come down to these two. So, like, don't think I don't like Unwound Future, because I do. But yeah, I think I like Diabolical Box a bit more. I really liked a lot of the puzzles in the casino, and some of my favorites were like the slot machine gun puzzle, the towering pagoda puzzle with like the floor, and I really like the hat grams. Some of the things that are really noteworthy that this game changed up is this is the first game where the memo function is like fully expanded. So in Curious Village, you could only erase the whole screen, and it only had one color and one pen size, which is super annoying. And then in the next game, I think you could change pen size, and you had you could use an eraser. This game you have that, but also multiple colors and pencil sizes. I actually don't think you could change pencil size in Diabolical Box. Puzzles also now have a fourth super hint that costs 2 hint coins. That is basically the solution to the puzzle. And there's also puzzle battles, which is kind of cool. I think that's only in this game. I just think that's fun. I really like that, and I wish they'd kept it more in the future games, although the future games change a lot more in terms of puzzles, so I like that. I think it's cool. There were a lot less of the like clever puzzles with like kind of the trick question endings in this game. I'm pretty sure it was more of a matter of just doing the work. I might be wrong on that, but that's my recollection of it. Moving on to the mini games in this game, there is the parrot, the toy car, and the picture book. And I think that this is the game where the series really found its stride in the types, the variety of mini games that they would have. The picture book is really similar to like the play, to like some of the ones we see later on, I think, in like the play, and I feel like there's one in the there's something similar in Last Spectre or Spectre's Call. But either way, this game, the mini games feel very like when I think of Professor Layton trunk mini games, I honestly think of this game, even though Diabolical Box are my favorite mini games. But so there's the parrot, the toy car, and the my god, the picture book. I hate the picture book, but that's just me. I hate the picture book. I hate the rabbit play. I hate all of those. I hate them. I do them always last. I always just pull up the guide and just do them. I hate them. I don't know why they piss me off, but they do. I think it's the fact that you like go, like I wouldn't mind the actual activity, but the fact that you have to like listen to it being read is so annoying. Like it would be one thing if it were voice acted, but it's not. It just adds, I don't care about it. I really like the parrot mini game. I think it's fun. That's like you have to stretch ropes to like bounce the parrot. I have a lot of fun with that one, and that's also fun because it's something that's fun every time you replay it. It's kind of hard. Like I've replayed this game a lot. I don't think I've ever like pulled up the mini games and been like, oh, I remember the solution to this. So it's fun every time. And then the toy car is really similar to the toy train mini game and to the toy robot mini game. And I think I like the toy train one the best, but I do like the toy car one a lot. So pretty cool. I have fun with that one, although I definitely cheat on some of the harder ones just because they're not fun for me. And I'm a very big proponent of I'm gonna cheat if it's not fun because I'm playing this for fun. Pretty top tier, or at least fairly average. I feel like most of the minigames, like the collection of minigames, are average. I feel like each game has minigames that I like less than the others and minigames that are great. I think this series does a really good job of like throwing in things, like something for everyone. Something fun for the summertime. I just like it. So puzzles are definitely strong. This game added a lot of new puzzle things with the memo function, the puzzle battles, and the super hints. So that's really cool. So this game, you know, you got to give it a lot of credit for that. Okay, moving on to the music in this game. Similarly, I think the music for this game is pretty strong. I think again, I'm gonna have to revisit. I gotta stop making these like comparisons before I've looked at all the games, but I do think that this is one of the more memorable games in terms of music. And I think I did say last video that I like this game's music as much as Diabolical Box, or like that they were like neck and neck. Looking back on it, that's honestly not true. So, you know, sorry. But the music in this game is good. It's a lot more like actively tense than in Diabolical Box. The words I kept using for Diabolical Box was just like creepy and like sad and like depressing and cold and just like eh. And this game is very much like tense. Like there's a lot of really good tracks that give you the feeling that you're being watched, and I think that fits perfectly because the second you're in future London, you know, like you're being watched by the family. You just, you know, it also, I think the music helps key you into the fact that like future Luke definitely has an ulterior motive. Like I think the music really fits the feel of, or the plot of the game. Let's see. London Streets is a good track, and you hear that a lot. Like Miracle Mask, the track you hear all the time, I hate that track. So, I mean, that's later, but like, I just think it's always like good when the track that you hear most often is like pretty good. So London Streets is fine. I really like the Gilded Seven casino music a lot too. Chinatown is a good track, although I think it should have been more different than London Streets. I'll touch more on that in a second. The one issue with this game is I do feel, though, it has the same issues as Curious Village in some ways, although to a lesser extent, where that like a lot of the tracks sound really similar, and this is going to come back in Atmosphere. It's kind of a similar critique I have there. I don't know. I think it's just the problem that a lot of these locations or a lot of the atmospheric like vibes aren't different enough to really call for music that's really different. You just have like ambling music kind of, and then you have tense music, and there are a couple sad tracks which I'll talk about, but like in terms of the tense tracks, or in terms of the ambling tracks, you have London Streets. You have a song that's literally like called More London Streets, although there's a lot of different song titles for these. Like I said, Chinatown doesn't even really sound that different from that. Then for the tense tracks, they even sound kind of similar. There's the Research Facility track, Crisis, Mobile Fortress. There's also some of the same or similar like Suspicion tracks that are used in the other games, and they all sound really similar. Mobile Fortress gets on my nerves a lot too. But then there's Towering Pagoda track, which reminds me a lot of the tower track in Curious Village. I don't know, like I feel like this game does tense music well, but it doesn't do it in many different ways, if that makes sense. The sad songs, again, are kind of a departure from this, but I don't know, like there's Memories, that's one of the sad tracks. That sticks out. Again, it's pretty different and it is pretty sad. Time Travel is the ending song of this game, and like all the ending songs in the other games, it is sad, and like a lot of the ending songs don't super like fit in super well to like the music in the games, but something about time travel in this game really doesn't fit in. Like when you compare it to like Iris from Diabolical Box, and also Iris just, it hits harder. I'm sorry, could just be me. Like Iris sort of goes along with the track Unfulfilled Feelings and Lost Forest and some of the other Fall Scent songs. Like it sounds similar enough to the Fall Scent songs, but Time Travel doesn't really even fit in with the songs in this game that would be the same mood. Like it doesn't sound anything like Memories or even the Picture Book track, which has the same like sad vibe. I just feel like it sticks out a lot. And whenever I'm watching the ending, I always get kind of like pissed off because I'm like in the depths of the like sad emotions that the ending causes, and then like I almost get taken out of it a little bit because I'm like, what the fuck is this song? Like, where did this come from? But I'm interested to hear your guys' take on that final song. I do think some of the real strong points in the soundtrack are the main theme. The Unwound Future theme is really good. was, again, they did a lot of new things with the puzzles, and some of what that was new puzzle tracks. In this game you have the OG puzzle track, which is always good, and then you have 2 new puzzle tracks, and then you have the puzzle battle track. And I'm really honestly kind of surprised it took them this long to make more than 1 puzzle track, just because, you know, you spend like most of the game solving puzzles, so it really does a lot to break up the monotony. And I like that a lot, but comparatively I think this music is a lot better than Curious Village, and better, I think, than the prequel trilogy. So again, one of the best musics, but not as good as Diabolical Box. So now we'll move on to Atmosphere. And I was really surprised with how I felt when I was writing this Atmosphere section and thinking about this. Because honestly, I think this game has a really, really weak atmosphere. And I was really surprised. Before I had thought about that, I feel like I would have just said that it has a good atmosphere, but I actually just really don't think it does. Like, there's just not that many atmospheric parts. And the ones that, the locations that to me call for strong atmospheres are locations that are really similar to locations in other games, and I think in other games they have stronger atmosphere. So let me like run through the locations in this game. I mean, there's London, future London, that's fine. Like, London to me should be kind of the base, like Control, like we're there all the time. We do actually get to explore more of, I mean, we do explore London a bit in this game, and we do get to explore it more in Last Spectre or Spectre's Call, but either way, that's fine. I'm fine if London doesn't really have too much of a strong atmosphere. So that's that. Then future London is like, I mean, it's a lot like London. Like, when you get down into future London, once you get out of the clock shop, there is like a rundown bus station. You see a lot of construction, and like this is important because they're like, oh, we're not in, like, we've time traveled. But that kind of disappears in a few screens, which I think is super weird. Like, you don't see evidence of that everywhere. You see evidence of that in like some places, especially as you head towards Chinatown, but like, it's just kind of weird. There's like that middle area of town near the arcade and like the hotel where like it's like really nice and honestly looks exactly like future London or like present day London. And I just think that's like, I don't know, it's just kind of boring. And Chinatown is cool, but it's not enough. Like, it's really weak to me atmospherically. Like, it looks really cool, the decor and the art is really cool, but first of all, you don't really do much there besides just like Towering Pagoda. Like, besides the decor, there's nothing really to it. There's no reason why it needed to be Chinatown. Even the family, like, it's very clearly a reference to like the Italian mafia. So like that's just like kind of weird to me. It's kind of just like a downtown market area, and I think Last Spectre, Spectre's Call, does the downtown market area way better. It's just like weird to me. The music doesn't even sound that different from other future London tracks. I think if you're gonna make a Chinatown, make Chinatown. Like, do that. The other thing, again, that's down here is the Towering Pagoda, which again, I have so many thoughts on the Towering Pagoda. I hate it so much, honestly, because first of all, it didn't need to be a pagoda. It just, again, this is like, seems like it's based on like the Italian mafia. Like, it's called the family. Like, they dress like stereotypical like mobsters in the American way of viewing them, which is through the lens of like the Italian mafia. So why is it in Chinatown? But besides that, it feels like they had a formula. Like, it feels to me like they just felt like they needed a climactic like building location, like where the bad guys are or whatever, like Hertzen Manor and like the Looming Tower in Curious Village. And they even try to do that where people are like, stay away from the Towering Pagoda, but like it just feels so much weaker than, you know, holy shit, there's a vampire up there, or be like, don't go to the tower, and seeing people getting kidnapped and like hearing it, like the creepy noises from the tower in Curious Village. I don't know. Also, the locations in that game are literally plot relevant. Like, there is a plot reason for why both of those locations look the way they do and are terrifying visually. And in this game, that's just not the case. So it's just like weird, because it felt to me like they needed a place to have the end game when the end game literally isn't even in the Towering Pagoda. Like, it's so bizarre to me. Like I said, it's really not even plot relevant besides just being a headquarter for the family, which they honestly should have just made the Thames Arms, or the factory lab thing that's across the river, or honestly the casino. It's just odd to me. Like, in a way, this game has almost more locations than Diabolical Box, or like maybe even, I don't know, about the same, but it just has half as much atmosphere. This game has way more like locations, and visually there's a lot more going on than in Curious Village, but what Curious Village lacked in the variety of locations and variety of atmosphere, at least like Saint Mystere itself and the tower had like a really strong atmosphere, in my opinion. But in this game, it's kind of the opposite, where you have this huge variety of places, but none of them are really fully emotionally or atmospherically like explored. And same thing, like the music goes into that. It's just odd. Like, we barely get to explore the lab. We don't even get the benefit of seeing the lab throughout most of the game like we do with the tower or with Hertzen Manor. Like, it's never in the background or whatever. People don't talk about the lab ever until like kind of near the end. To the game's credit, though, I do think the casino is very cool but underutilized, and the clock shop is very cool but underutilized. And I think just the atmosphere in this game would have been like quadrupled if they had made the family headquarters in the casino and moved the lab to be hidden under the Thames Arms. Because if we spent more time in either of those places, then I think the atmosphere in both of those places would be really, really cool. And like, they could have like put more energy into that, and like, you know, making the music and of those places distinct from everywhere else. But because we're just like bouncing around from everywhere, it all starts to like blend together. And I also think, like, going back to the characters, the villagers aren't distinct enough and don't have like enough of like some sort of weird character, you know, like shared quality like they do in the other two games that we've talked about. Also, to me, there's a indescribable Layton-esque scale of like weirdness to characters. It's just weird. And this game, the ensemble characters just don't feel weird enough to me. Like, I don't know. So that's just something for me. So honestly, I think that this one probably ranks about on par or even slightly worse than Curious Village in terms of atmosphere. Even comparing it to Azran Legacy, which, you know, has the same thing of bouncing around a lot, they go for it. They really go for it with the atmosphere on that. And, you know, I guess maybe the game, maybe the developers wanted to make a realistic atmosphere in this game, but that really juxtaposes with the whole like actual plot. So I don't really know what the thought process was. But yeah, I just think the atmosphere is actually probably the weakest point of this game. Now we can move to the final part, which is the ending or the end game. And I think this is where people really fall in love with this game and the storytelling and the resolution, and I definitely understand that. So like I'm going to say in all of these reviews, if you haven't played this and you haven't watched my really long 2-hour Layton timeline video, please, 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 please go at least watch the portion of that really long video where I talk about this game, because I can't explain everything here. I just can't explain everything that makes the end game make sense here. So go watch that if you haven't, or you haven't played the game. But essentially, we learn that Dr. Stangun is Dimitri Allen, and that's a man who worked with Claire and Bill Hawks in that lab, in a lab that was developing a time machine. And 10 years ago from the present, on the day that they were to test the machine, Dimitri Allen, who again also loved Claire, noticed a flaw in the machine, and he told Bill Hawks. But Bill Hawks purposely ignored it and pushed on with the experiment, and this flaw caused the machine to explode, killing Claire and leveling like a lot of the street. So this explosion killed a lot of people, and it killed the parents of a boy named Clive. And Clive grew up and like kind of swore to get revenge on not only Bill Hawks but all of London, or like, I don't know, to like figure out the mystery of how, I don't know. Revenge plot, okay? Dimitri Allen, on the other hand, was motivated to create a working time machine in order to go back in time and save Claire. So together they built a set that's future London, and they built this in a massive cavern that's underneath real London. And they kidnapped scientists who worked on time travel to force them to work on this machine. They basically told him that they'd been taken through this wormhole that was the clock shop to 10 years into the future, and the only way to get back to their timeline is create this working time machine. Clive also secretly had them work on a giant machine to destroy London because he was using Dimitri as a pawn, essentially, because Clive's real goal is to destroy London. But the really sad part revolves around Celeste, who, if you remember, I said was Claire's twin sister who Layton has been seeing around future London. And Celeste is revealed to actually be like Claire, like the real Claire, because what happened was right before the time machine exploded 10 years ago, it worked for an instant and sent her 10 years into the future, into the present. So, yeah, but however, like, that is unstable, and she, like, knows that she'll eventually get pulled back into the past to die in that explosion. And Dimitri Allen knew this. I think he, like, theorized this or something, which was, like, part of why he wanted to, like, have this time machine built. I don't really know. So he wanted to build a time machine to, like, save Claire from having to go back. And the professor learns all of this right before Claire has to, like, go back to her timeline to die. And it's so sad. Like, that scene is so sad. I don't know a single person. If you don't cry during that scene, talk to someone. So again, it's a very good wrap up. And then we defeated Clive and his machine or whatever, but it doesn't matter. We don't care about that. We care about the love story. But in terms of judging this endgame, I think it's really interesting and really hard to judge. And this game is so hard to judge for me because I kind of see it as two threads that obviously connect, where we have Dimitri's motive to save Claire from this explosion, and Clive's motive to destroy London because of this explosion. And I think the first motive is super, super, super strong, and it's also just so good because, like, it explains why Don Paolo's there. It explains why Don Paolo ends up helping us. Like, it's so good. It's so good. But Clive's motive, on the other hand, is just to, like, destroy London. And like I said, I think this game keeps, like, this series just keeps falling into this trap of thinking that they need some, like, big cinematic, like, villain or, like, takedown scene. And this happens time and time again, although I think, and this is what I will praise the prequel trilogy for, is it makes sense in the prequel trilogy. It makes sense in the prequel trilogy every time. But, like, here and also in Curious Village, it's the same thing. We don't need a villain, and I think the stories are so much stronger without a villain. Like, you could take Clive out of the game, and they even comment on this in the game, where, like, Layton, like, has some line about, like, how Clive basically brought Layton into the future because he wanted Layton to stop him. It was like a cry for help kind of thing. So, like, even he doesn't believe in this motive, but I just think it's, like, weak. I think we could take Clive out of the game and just have the resolution be Layton, like, convincing Dimitri that he has to let these scientists go, that he has to let Claire go, and, like, that would be so powerful too. Like, Layton actually in the game, like, if he had a choice, I don't know if he would let her go, but I think that would be so interesting character-wise too, and it would be pretty similar, in my opinion, to what happens in the Diabolical Box, where it's like, I mean, yeah, you're revealing, like, the whole gas and whatever, but, like, you're really just, like, convincing Anton to, like, let go of these hatreds and to, like, let go of the past and, like, move on. And they could have done that so beautifully in this game. And they do it pretty beautifully in this game. And then, like, Clive and his dumbass machine comes in and you're like, what the fuck? Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, with Dimitri, it could have also been, like, Dimitri could have been the one wanting to get revenge on Bill Hawks, because that was part of his motivation too. Like, I just think that would have been so convincing. I just think Clive's motive to destroy London because of this makes very little sense. And just takes away from the really, 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 really strong storytelling with the whole plot between Layton, Don Paolo, Claire, Dimitri, that whole story. So, again, this ending's really, for me, really hard to talk about, because on the one hand, I love it. On the other hand, I'm like, almost hate it, because I could see just how much better, in my opinion, it would be without Clive. Or without Clive wanting to destroy London. I think Clive could have been worked in other ways. The other thing I want to note, and this is such a small thing, is the weird test subject rabbit. I don't know what the fuck is up with him. Like, especially because, like, when you're still working under the framework of you're in the future, you're like, okay, this is animal testing that happened in the 10 years between the past and the future. But then like once you realize that's false, you're like, okay, so did somebody like test animals up there? Like, I mean, yeah, we're animal testing, but like what? I don't get it. I don't really get what that is. It's such a minor thing, but I just needed to like bring it up because it makes me feel, I forget about it every time, and then he starts like screaming at you and I'm like, what the fuck? Also, it's like, again, they don't voice act a lot of animals in these series, even when Luke's talking to them, so I'm like, why him? I don't know. Either way, to wrap up, I think the ending is better than Last Spectre. Because Last Spectre also, in my mind, I compare a lot to this game because they feel very similar to me. But we'll get to that. And it's, I think, slightly better when I look at the pros and the cons than Curious Village. But to me, definitely not as strong as Diabolical Box. Although, again, if it didn't end with like us having to defeat Clive and his stupid machine, oh, I think this game could really beat Diabolical Box for me. Like a lot. So that's the ending. So finally, now that I've talked about all the elements, it's time to give this game a formal rating. And I think I've landed on a really, really solid A. Although again, this game is so hard for me to evaluate because I think a lot of parts of this game are on par with the others. And some of the categories I've talked about are almost better and worse than the other games. Like the premise and the ending are two main points where like in a lot of ways I think they're interesting, and especially the ending is so good, but in a lot of ways it's worse to me than other games. But I think what this game offers is really unique compared to other games, and that is the emotional storytelling and development with the professor. And we don't see anything like this again until Miracle Mask, and even that, I would argue, is a different sort of like exploration. I don't think it's as poignant and like hard hitting really until we get to Azrin Legacy, which is so phenomenal, which we'll get to that. But even that isn't a love story. So like there's something so unparalleled about a well-told tragic love story involving the main character and involving time travel. That's what this game is about. For me, at least. Like, that's what this game, that's what the excellence and the pull in this game is. And so to me, that's what pulls it to an A. But if Claire and the flashbacks weren't part of this game, or honestly, even if it weren't, like, the professor, this game would probably be a C to me. And anytime people talk about why they love this game, it's Claire and that story. Like, and they're so right on that. So I also just wanted to say that I've been kind of hard on this game, and again, I don't want people to think I don't like this game because I do love this game. I just feel like there's two comparisons that I was kind of trying to work through in this video, which is this game versus all the other games, which is the point of this series that I'm doing. But also with this game specifically, to me, I was working through also this game versus fans' perspective of this game. Because I think that this game, I like this game, I think a little bit less than other people, which is fine. But I think this game ranks a lot higher than most of the other games. So, I mean, I love this game. I'm giving it an A. But when we're talking about things in terms of all these categories, I could even move it down to a B, honestly. Really just the atmosphere. Just, I don't know. I am just shocked at how the atmosphere could have been more. They really should have, like, pushed, like, a steampunk vibe everywhere in Future London. I would have loved that. Or I don't know. The atmosphere is just really a miss for me. But either way, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Because I'm kind of scared for the comment section of this video because I know you guys, I know a lot of people love this game, and even on my other videos I've gotten a lot of comments about this specific game and this ending. So let me know what you guys think. Especially on the atmosphere, because I never hear people talk about the atmosphere of this game. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a like. If you like talking about Professor Layton, or like you just like this like video form, please think about subscribing. We'd love to have you in our little family of no ones. Another thing I just wanted to say if you're still here is that I have been trying to find an emulator to, no, not an emulator, I would never do that, but I've been trying to find a way to stream the Professor Layton games on Twitch, and I found a way, and then the audio wouldn't capture, and I'm having all these problems, so that's, like, I've been wanting to stream them so bad, and I keep running into issues. So I might just have to stream with no audio, which would break my heart too, but honestly, I think I might run into problems when I want to upload those playthroughs on YouTube, so that might be what I have to do, at least for the beginning, because I'm just like really want to start streaming them. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Love you guys, bye.